When you're ready. Hey, and welcome to Watercooler Live, and we'll just put my camera up. We'll be laughing. Camera one. That's it. Welcome to Watercooler Live, the Menzies Research Centre's weekly webcast, coming to you from Sydney, from our office in Sydney. And we've got a great collection of guests for you. I'm Nick Cater. I'm Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre. Welcome to everybody who's joining us again. We've had some 4 episodes. This is number 5 when we've been going out on Zoom. Tonight we're on new platforms. You can't have too many platforms, in my view. We want everybody to watch this show, so we're going to be going out on everything. We're going to go out on The Cave next week, fingers crossed. The Cave is a new platform. You've got to look at it. I'll be talking about that later. So that's where we are. You found us, obviously. The guests tonight, well, we thought we started last week to have a talk about the Michael Moore documentary, the Michael Moore, Jeff Gibbs documentary, Planet of the Humans, in which they got a humorous way look at some of the difficulties with renewables. But I don't agree. I don't trust Michael Moore. So let's go to an expert on this, and what better expert on the energy sector could we go to than the Energy Minister himself, Angus Taylor, who'll be joining us from Goulburn later on. Before that, I thought we'd get out and about, right? We're join Mark and Kylie Phillips at the Federal Hotel in Port Pirie, and another famous publican, a man who's such a famous publican, he should go into politics, he knows so much about the country. That's Craig Laundy, of course, was member for Reid up until a year ago, and he's now back in the pubs game, and we'll be talking to him about how we can get the pubs out of this lockdown, how we can get people around the bar again, safely, of course. And before that, first of all, my first guest tonight is Danita Warren. Danita, Executive Officer of Master Builders Australia. And Danita is an important person to go to with jobs. Welcome, Danita. Are you there? Let's have a look where we were. There we go. A few little issues technically here. We're just going to use this fantastic new Australian-built vision mixer. But Danita, you're with the Master Builders Association. I think your industry... Right? Sound, please. Sound. Just a moment. Just while Will gets used to sound. Sound on the desk there. We're getting sound on the desk. Hello. Yeah. Sorry, Danita. Sorry, are you there? Well, look, I might. we have a few glitches here tonight. You look fantastic, by the way, from Canberra. Lovely picture there, it's right in front of Parliament House. It's strangely daylight there. But Donita is going to be talking about the construction sector. She, the Martin Builders Association, looks after their interests. Fortunately, I think for us, the construction sector kept going through this crisis. It could have easily been shut down as an emergency measure, but it was important that it kept going. And the comparison here is New Zealand, where getting the lockdown right, of course, was crucial. It was a case of almost the Three Bears story, of course: too hot, too cold, get right. And we will never know. I mean, I think we've commented on this before. We will never know whether, like the Sydney Harbour Bridge, when they built the Sydney Harbour Bridge, they had no idea whether it was over-engineered or not. You just don't know these things. It turned out it was very well engineered, and let's hope. I believe that the COVID crisis, we got it about right there. So just bear with me a second. Will, what's the problem there?
It's not working. The sound isn't coming through. I've tried everything without output.
Okay, bear with me a sec.
And it's giving you that can through as well, which makes no sense.
James, are you there? Son of James? Can't hear you either, James. I'm going to keep talking while Will tries to get this going again. Just bear with me a sec.
the public who are now have an appetite for doing the right thing and saying, don't go to this area, let this economy get back on track as a roadmap to potentially our way out of this more broadly. Yeah, the Farmers Home Hotel in Wagga, but I'm biased. Front end, they've been phenomenal. They worked out really quickly that Centrelink was not designed to handle mass unemployment. The way it was actually set up was to deal with unemployed people with interview requirements face to face, when face to face would end up being deadly, and they were quick to flip to who was the organisation that actually knew the staff out there that would be looking for jobs, and that was the employer. And that they outsource Centrelink's responsibilities to the taxation office, who have an ongoing relationship with every business in the country. And guess what? Every business in the country has a day-to-day relationship with their staff members. So they put the onus on us, and they put the onus on employers to actually administer this system. Yes, did they have the facts and the figures? Was there, work to do afterwards? But the way they did it so quickly was very bloody clever. But that's the history. Where I worry now is there are different, Danita Warren, the previous guest, spoke about 10% of the employment in the country being construction. I come from the tourism and hospitality sector. We're 13% of on how they work with us. We've put the businesses to sleep. How do we bring them back to life? About the Ensuring Integrity Act. We have for the first time, and the blame, Nick, lies on both sides of the fence. Normally, Conservative politicians come on your show and bash unions. Union members come on your show and bash the Conservative side of politics. We have just seen both on two fronts, industrial relations, unions and employers understand that the employee, they both value those importantly and work together. But we've also, Nick, seen something I hope doesn't finish anytime soon, and as someone that had 7 years in the circus, and chaired 3 or 4 different COAG boards, we've seen federalism and go back to normal partisan politics bullshit, because when that happens, nothing gets done. That said, I've got some strong views on, where businesses will actually be And it's a case by case. And, I'm blessed that my family, I'm third generation. My kids are now working in the business, fourth generation. We've been there a long time. We've done booms and busts. But my big fear is that those small and medium-sized businesses, which account, again, another former minister for small and family businesses, 60% of the employment in the country, really in the next few months, once the government lift the restrictions, with social distancing still in place and the overheads they have, they're going to have some real... More importantly, in terms of unemployment, when it's not profitable to open the doors again, and they might ultimately close. The $64 question. Yeah, the sad thing, Nick, the practical reality, let's say 4, 6, 8 weeks. I'm guessing we'll reopen with social distancing measures that we closed with. You basically come down to one person every 4 square metres. You have businesses whose patronage is then determined by the size of their premises. Guess what? The overwhelming majority of family businesses are not big joints. So if they rely on customer patronage, and in my sector they do, they are going to be severely restricted as to who they can actually have in the door in the first place, and therefore, say they lose, take the pub up the road from me, which we own, the Woolwich Pier. I'm going to lose half to 60% of my customers. I'm therefore going to lose half to 60% of my staff. These are the issues that Josh and Scott and Angus, who you've got on next, need to think about longer term, because, especially I'm from tourism and hospitality, I don't envisage us having international tourism until we have a vaccine worldwide for COVID-19. Now, of hospitality, the accommodation, conferencing side of things, that will be tumbleweeds coming down the street. So, Nick, some very big challenges still for the federal government to overcome. Nick, this is the first time until this crisis, because I went down there 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, as someone that came from a commercial business background, again, parroting that Angus was the same, he and I were in the same class. But, I spoke to Gus before we kicked off tonight and said, I just hope they can solve. Who'll do it free of charge, Nick? And to make sure that they get sage advice, or as good as close to sage as morsels can give. We get the thing back up and firing as quickly as possible, because, and you said it, mentally and Mark, the public in Port Pirie, that the locals want to be back in the pub on a Friday night having a beer with their mates, the guys and the girls in Port Pirie. And the sooner we can do that, mate, the sooner that not just the public will be, mate, but the community will be.
muted myself. You can hear me right now? Yeah. Yeah, look, it was great to hear Craig's voice there, and Craig and I also always talked a lot and stayed in touch the whole time we were in Parliament, and it's good to see him back in the land of living, and I've been wondering how he's been getting on with the pubs, because he's right in the epicentre of this whole thing. It's an extraordinary situation to be being a publican at the moment, so fascinating to hear him describe what's going on there, because it really is ground zero in this whole COVID-19 scenario. We're making decisions here where there are enormous unknowns, and they're decisions that have very big impacts, and they're decisions over which the federal government only has some influence. And this has been the mastery and the magic, in a sense, of the National Cabinet, is that it has been a wide using a federal model, which has historically been very difficult. And I think it's been very successful. So that in itself has created a whole new dynamic. But the fact of the matter is we have, I think all of us have been completely immersing ourselves in trying to understand and get the best handle on economy and health. And I mean, in many ways, what's characterised our approach, in contrast to other countries at the federal level, is to say, hey, this is not just a health problem, or it's not just an economic problem. We've got to solve for both, and we've got to try to be balanced throughout this. And I think we've got that right. I think that has been the right approach. Clearly now, open the economy and keep people safe at the same time and healthy at the same time, but reopening the economy is absolutely the priority right now. And I think we can do it in a sensible way, but we've got to use technology, we've got to use testing, we've got to maintain some of those social distancing practices, which are embedded in the way people are behaving anyway. Yeah, I mean, look, every industry has some mythology, and people who are selling things, will oversell them from time to time. And I think Michael Moore's called a lot of it out. I mean, obviously, there's significant aspects of that documentary I don't agree with. I mean, the idea that we're going to solve this problem by reducing the I can't come at that. It just makes absolutely no sense to me, and that's an extreme left perspective that I'll never reconcile myself with. On the other hand, he's called out some of the realities that we're having to deal with in the electricity sector right now, which is, in particular, I think the problem of intermittency. I mean, you ultimately have to deliver power to a customer and in a volume that the customer wants. And this is a pretty basic business concept, that you've got to deliver the customer what they want. And the truth is that if you're reliant on the sun or the wind, you may or may not be able to do that. And that is a problem. It's a problem to be solved. It's a problem that I think can be solved, but you shouldn't pretend that it's not a problem and it's not an issue. And I think he absolutely called that out. I mean, he called out other issues. Powered from coal, and of course there was a scene in the documentary that made that point in a very sharp way. So I think, being fact-based, shedding this back to realities, I think he did some of that, and that's what he's inclined to do. I think there are other aspects of it, as I said, which I can't buy. No, and yeah, I mean, look, the truth is that renewables have been pretty common at the time, because we've replaced that largely now with solar pumps, and they've been phenomenal innovation, actually extremely effective. But you've got to know what technology can do and what it can't. And, that my point about intermittency, when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, you've got to have a solution if you're going to have solar and wind. Now, when you're pumping water up into a tank and you don't need to be pumping all the time, that works perfectly fine. In fact, it works extremely well. The world of delivering energy at an affordable price to real customers who need to know that when they flick the switch, the light comes on. You've got to have the answers. And this is where I think there hasn't been a hard-headed approach from Yeah, so just to give you a sense of how significant this is, about 25% of our energy in the national electricity market is now regularly being produced by renewables. A very significant portion of that's household solar. I'm sure there's people listening to this and watching this who've got solar panels on their house. And in terms of investment, we're right at the top of the league table in the world on a per capita basis. Last year, it was about $9 billion that was spent on renewables. Big part of that, again, household solar, to a lesser extent, large-scale solar, and to a lesser extent, again, large-scale wind. So these are disappearing, particularly for the large scale, and we're not replacing that. They will fade away in the next year or so to be insignificant. But the fundamental problem with it all is, how do you turn it into an electricity load that meets the customer's need? I mean, if you're an aluminium smelter, you need 24/7 power. It must be there when you ask for it. If it isn't, the smelter basically freezes, and it costs you millions, potentially billions of dollars to replace it. So you've really got to get hard-headed about this, and that's what, as a government, we've been doing. We've said, look, there's a role for renewables, but of affordable baseload power or affordable dispatchable power, which delivers. Well, we've got a case study that already exists, which we've got two. So in this country, we saw manufacturing in Victoria on the back of cheap gas out of Bass Strait and cheap coal in the Latrobe Valley, and that had an enormous impact. But don't underestimate the role that gas played in all of that. The second case study, of course, which is very real and very now, is in the United States, where we've seen low emphasised The first is gas is not just a source of energy, it's actually important in industrial processes. So it can produce ammonia and other industrial feedstock. It can be used as industrial feedstock for a lot of manufacturing. And so affordable gas is enormously important for a manufacturing sector as well as for your energy sector. One of the things it can do, which I think Michael Moore overlooked in that documentary in a substantial way, is it can shore up your intermittency from renewables. So if you've got solar on your roof, the problem is when the sun goes down this time of year, you'll need your power. And so a gas generator is very flexible. It can flick on and off. It's kind of like the cooker, your gas cooker. Cell on your roof. So gas is an increasingly important fuel source in the energy mix right around the world. The United States is probably the most obvious example of that. In fact, they've done so well on this. We've seen the fertiliser industry, for instance, shifting from other countries to the United States. So he's a developed country that is seeing significant manufacturing because of affordable gas. Now, here's the good news. The good news is we've seen a structural shift in the gas price in this country pre-COVID-19 as the price is coming down, driving down the price of wholesale electricity. That will pass through to customers. This is a really important development and one that as a country we need to capitalise on, just as Donald Trump and America has capitalised on it in recent years. Well, it is happening, and we're putting pressure on states right now to do exactly this. So we've realised that trying to do everything through some kind of multilateral arrangement doesn't always work. We've seen that at the international level. I mean, multilateral agreements are hard to come by and often ineffective. But going straight to a state and doing a deal with them can be much more effective. So we've done a deal with New South Wales for them to deliver 70 petajoules of gas, which is, put that in perspective, that's a big part of the East Coast demand. They're going to have to deliver on that. There's a few ways they can deliver on it, but they've got to deliver on 19 pandemic, they took away their moratorium on gas. So this is great news. I should say, by the way, all of this has got to happen. The increasing role of gas in our industrial and energy system shouldn't be done in a way where we sort of arbitrarily lose coal-fired power stations, because all the gains you make from having affordable gas will be lost if you have a big Hazelwood event like we had in Victoria. Coal still has a very important role to play, and renewables, of course, has a role to play that we've already discussed. But gas can be the filler, and it is a very, very important part of this system. And the state governments, I think, are starting to realise this. The pressure we've been putting on them has clearly been delivering, and we look forward to. But look, I think you've got to bring it down to very simple terms, and sometimes people don't like doing this, but you've got to bring it down to a very simple equation, which is when the sun goes down and your solar cells aren't working, there has to be a solution. Now, there's a limited number of those solutions. You've got your coal-fired power stations. Sure, they're not that flexible, so turning them up and down is not easy. You've got hydro, and that can be turned up and down quickly, and that's effective. But in a country like Australia, because of our geography, there's limited potential for that. A lot of the environmentalists like batteries, but the truth is that the economics of a battery beyond relatively short-term storage is not there yet. And it can act as a sort of it can put a surge of power into your system for a short period of time if you need it, but beyond that, it's very, very expensive. And so gas has a very obvious role to play in this system. It's got to be affordable. You've got to have it in ample supply. We're now seeing that happening. And we've had problems with that. We're now addressing it. We're seeing changes in the state approval regimes. We're seeing an increase in supply. And now I think is the time to capitalise on it. Well, you can't, if you don't have a solution to what happens when the sun goes down, then the solution is people's power goes off. It's that simple. And whilst you can absorb a certain amount of intermittent renewables into your system, once you're getting up towards 25%, which is where we're at now or more, it becomes impossible to absorb more without having a complement like gas. So I've always been perplexed that the extremes in this debate reject gas in the way they do. It has just always seemed odd. But, I think the truth is it's just an ideological opposition to fossil fuel industry. Well, that's not good economics. That's not good policy. And that will end badly if we kind of mindset. Yeah. So, I mean, look, moratorium in this country, and as you know, Nick, unless that moratorium is removed, viable in this industry, but in this country. But we put a parliamentary committee to work last year to look at this. They've given the report back. We're working our way through that now, and they've done some good work. So there's no doubt that you want a lot of horses in this race. You want as many horses as you can. A horse that's been very effective for countries like France and the US over the years. Well, so here's the untold reasons for that. One is Australians and households in Australia have got very, very smart with the way they're using energy. We've also seen, as we've talked, just massive investment in solar, and particularly household solar, and that's definitely had an impact. And we've also seen big changes in land management in the farming sector in Australia, and farmers should be given far more credit than they are for the role they've played. The result is our emissions below our 2030 target, way below our 2030 target. We're already has been rapid growth in our exports, and this is a good news story. I mean, we should be proud of this. We've got the biggest LNG export industry in the world. Our agricultural sector has continued to go from strength to strength in recent years with higher commodity prices, particularly for livestock. Our manufacturing sector, whilst it's faced challenges from higher energy costs, which are now being addressed, it's actually gone pretty well in steel and aluminium in recent years. So that side of it has been more challenging. Of course, with COVID-19, you've seen a reduction in economic activity, reducing emissions. That's not how we want to reduce emissions. We want to reduce emissions by deploying technologies that are going to strengthen industry and strengthen manufacturing and strengthen small business, not weaken it. And that's what good technologies can do for you. Yeah, this is a phenomenal opportunity. If you think about good, productive agricultural land, it absorbs more carbon. So how does that work? Well, carbon is just organic matter. So if you're growing a lot on your land, that soil holds more organic matter. If you've got more productive agriculture, it holds more organic matter. So productive farming practices and good productive soil management is exactly the same as what is. These numbers are not small. They are very, very big. If you take your soil carbon from 3% to 4% on your land, typically you'll add 30 or 40 tonnes of carbon per hectare of land you hold. These are very, very big numbers, right? And so increasingly productive agriculture in Australia is good, not just for our food security and our exports and our agricultural sector. All of those things have huge benefits, but it actually also reduces emissions. And we've only just started to touch the sides. Much more we can do in this area. And I'm very confident that Australia, of all countries in the world, can really lead the way on that kind of work. We're one of the most productive agricultural countries in the world, and yet there's still a lot more potential. So I look forward to but in the process we'll be also dealing with some of these emissions challenges.